Angie,
John.
what makes a coach attractive to clients?
Ooh, whole bunch of things, I think. Their energy, their experience, their openness, and probably a few more things as well.
What about their lavish lifestyle, their big mansion, their garage full of Lambos, and all the models hanging around with them in their pool or their yacht?
No, John, that is the stuff that makes people attracted to fake gurus and scammers.
Oh, damn. I'm going to have to completely rethink my new Facebook ad.
Oh, gosh, let's just start the show.
Welcome to the Coaching Clinic with John and Angie, the show for professional coaches that explores the ins and outs of coaching, from working with clients through to running and marketing your coaching business.
If you're a professional coach who's committed to your own personal and professional growth, cares about making a difference, and wants to have a successful coaching business, you're in the right place.
My name's John Ball.
And I'm Angela Bezignano.
Between us, we have over 50 years of coaching experience and best practices to share with you, from getting started to scaling up your business.
We know what works and what doesn't, as well as what it really takes to have a successful and thriving coaching business.
With new episodes every Wednesday.
Make sure you're subscribed to get them fresh.
Angie, one of the hardest things for coaches to do is to find the clients who they're going to work with. Now, we've talked recently about how to launch your business, but you're not really going to have a business if you don't have the clients. Let's say you've been following our episodes and you've been niching yourself and you've been thinking about the right things to be thinking about for a launch. How do you then go and get some clients?
I think the good starting place is, we already talked about niching, right? We talked about finding the ideal client that is worth our time, energy, that we're a good fit for. And I think that's the first space, right? I think we have to start with, who do I really want to talk to? And then we need to figure out where we can find them in abundance, right? We don't want to cherry pick and just one here, maybe one there, because that, I think, is what many people coming into the coaching industry, I think that's like their first level of failure. And they don't fail forward. They stop and they go, oh, well, this just isn't working. But it's because they're not looking to find, for example, if you're looking to do leadership coaching, well, where are you looking for those leaders? Where are you trying to find them? And if you try to find one here and one there, I just don't think that that's a good recipe to a strong launch.
No, I agree. We talked previously about how we both started working initially with some clients who were people who knew us or were at least aware of us and what we were doing. But even then, it's hard to get those people if you haven't sort of set your stall and saying, oh, this is what I'm actually coaching people on. When I started getting clients was when I was focused more on helping people build their business, and ended up actually mostly working with coaches. And so I think probably for at least 10 years, I was helping coaches start and build their businesses, and a lot of them just giving them the guidance to do that. That was great. That was a great niche to come in on, and it was help that was really needed. When it comes to finding the clients, I think people have all sorts of weird ideas about what they should or shouldn't be doing. I don't know, maybe you have this experience as well, but a lot of people now seem to be doing everything. They're throwing everything at it and probably not getting a lot of return for that, for their investment.
Well, I think, you know what, let's go back to what we were talking about and we were poking fun at in the beginning, right? Is that fake gurus and scammers. And I think that ties into what you just said about throwing everything, right? Trying to be all things to all people is not going to work. Now, I do have one or two friends that are actually life coaches. So their business model is, well, I could talk to anybody because I'm sitting and I'm talking about life and the areas of life. So I'm not going to say that that does not exist, because it certainly does. Okay. But still, what you always want to be thinking about is, where am I going to find them? I'm always going to come back to that piece where, you know, yes, you can start with everybody you know, right? Who's in your book of business or who do you know to launch and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. But in the long term, because that might bring you some immediate success or appear like it's immediate success, but it's going to run dry eventually. The idea of coaching is that we don't want to keep people with us forever and ever, right? Coaching is supposed to, hey, move you up, move you on. So where are you finding these people when you are lead generating? over the long term so that you have built a sustainable business. It's really important to be able to do that. So when you say throwing everything at it, tell me, because I have my own ideas of what that means. What does that mean for you? What are you seeing?
Yeah. Okay. So I see that they're trying to be omnipresent on social media channels. They're trying to do
Mm,
the YouTube, the Instagram, the LinkedIn, the Facebook, all of it, and start a community, have a podcast, have a YouTube channel, have a blog, whatever else, all of it, a book, speaking, everything.
mhm.
And they're trying to do it all at once.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of what I thought you meant. But I wanted to be clear for everybody who's listening because because here's the thing. Since you and I got into this, so we've said between the two of us, we have over 50 years of coaching experience. That's a lot.
Mhm.
And
Yeah. And
we've
most of it's
seen it.
yours.
Stop. Well, okay, if you say so. But I'm saying, but when you and I started, right, in our businesses, it was a very
Yeah.
different landscape in terms of lead generating. And you were going to sit in a networking group or things like that. It had to be much more in person, right? And
Yeah.
maybe some cold calling. We weren't really putting out email campaigns. This was a long time ago, remember? So I think that for coaches that are coming into this space now, it's hard not to see what's going on around you and not want to join in on that and feel like the right thing to do is to do all of it.
Yeah.
I think it's just a perception. That's how you do it.
I feel like it's part of the hustle culture. There are people out there, and I'm not going to name names, but there's like hustle, 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 grind, 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 and it never ends. But if you actually saw their journey, that's not what they've done. They have focused in on a particular area and have been able to expand. They have teams, they're delegating stuff. They're not the ones who are doing all of the hustle. I'm not saying they're not working hard, but they're not doing what individual coaches are perhaps trying to do, which is do it all themselves. And that is a big difference. When you can afford to pay people and have a team and delegate a lot of the work and have people who have expertise in different social media channels and other kind of advertising, then yes, you can do more and you can be more omnipresent. But until you get to that level, you're going to have to focus in. And that's just the reality of it. But that message is not so much out there as it should be.
I have to say, I'm so glad that you brought that up because I feel like one of the number one killers of all things coaching businesses, besides trying to be all things to all people and not really knowing where to go, what to do, but in the business structure, you definitely have to identify where you need to delegate. And I understand, like, we should have a budget, and that's part of having a great business or a solid business is deciding what the budget is that you have. And when you have a budget, if you have no budget, it's going to cost you. I did it. This is me. I do not want to sit there and post on social media all day. I do not want to. It's not a can't, it's I do not want to. I want to be working in my business, not on my business. So what have I done? I've hired people because the cost of me taking all of that time out every week is leaving me it was leaving me very little room to actually coach. to actually, if I
Right.
actually got clients, what was I going to do? Because my week was so full of, I think I told you this, I call them like NIPAs, NIPA, okay, not nipples, NIPAs, non-income producing activities. Are they necessary? Absolutely. But that is not what's really going to help me earn my income. And I had to delegate. And I think that's a really important piece for anybody starting this type of business is to decide what's going to cost me more time than it's really worth. And is that social media?
Yeah, I think that's a really great point because even if all your efforts did pay off and you end up with a full client list, you are then going to have that problem of you don't have time to keep all that up. So
Yep.
you're going to have to bring
Yep.
other people in to do it. It's just the realities of running your business. You cannot have a full client list and do everything else that you're doing when you don't have a full client list. So it has to be some level of balance. But if you are finding your clients in the right place and the right kinds of people, which is, if you've got the niching question answered, you know the problem you're solving for people, that should be a
Mhm.
bit easier to figure out. You do not need to be in all of the places. For many people, if you're more focused on business side of things, LinkedIn is probably the place for you to be. If your audience or I say demographic is probably not the word I want to use, but if your potential audience is maybe more of millennial crowd, maybe Instagram is the place that you need to be more present
Yeah.
because that's where a lot of people are hanging out. So it is going to the watering holes and joining in the conversations and adding value and all of those things that needs to be happening. And ideally, if you want to go faster, paying for some advertising and not just throwing money at it, but actually figuring out how to do it right, either for yourself or hiring someone who does know what they're doing, that will move the
Mhm.
needle faster.
Yeah, I love so here's what we're saying, strategy, be strategic, right? You know
Yeah.
your niche, you know your message, you know your niche, right? You know who's going to probably respond best to what you are putting out there. But going to the places where you're, and I am going to use the word demographic, where do they meet? Where do they gather? So for me, my ideal, my avatar that I have now just fine tuned is middle aged men and women. So I'm not necessarily going to be making posts on TikTok about what I do professionally. It's not that they're not there, it's not that they don't watch. But if they are watching, that's not what they're necessarily looking for. So I'm going to spend my time and my effort on LinkedIn. And I hate to say this, but even on Facebook, because that's where they tend to sit.
Mm.
So I will do that. And that's all I'm doing. I have friends that are
Yeah.
like, you should be on Instagram and you should be on Twitter. And I'm like, no, I shouldn't, because that's not where my people are sitting.
Right. So if you have a favorite social media channel that you like to hang out on, then maybe sure, include it in what you're doing. But is that where your
Right.
audience is? But I do think there is a differentiation that we probably will talk about this at some point of, are you consuming or are you creating? Because there's a difference when it comes to
Oh, yeah.
social when it comes to social media. And most people, business owners included, are spending the majority of their time on social media consuming rather than creating. And that is completely the wrong way around. So there's some stuff that needs to change around that. But we did take the piss a little bit out of the sort of scammers, the fake gurus and stuff, the guys who like do those videos in their garage next to the Lamborghinis that probably aren't even theirs. And those people are out there, but I think we see far less of them now. Well, I think I do because I probably blocked most of them, but we see far less of them now because things have changed in the post horrible events of a few years back where we couldn't socialize much and things like that. Things changed. People became much more focused on relationship. And I think that had a huge impact on how we, as coaches, as speakers, market ourselves and reach out to people, because the relationship side of stuff suddenly became a much bigger deal. It was already on the way to happening, but I feel that got super accelerated by
Mhm.
quarantines and everything else that followed from that. So building those relationships is one of the most important parts. And how you get those relationships to happen, well, that's up to you, because probably my number one strategy for finding new clients is going and appearing on other people's podcasts or video channels and getting myself out there in their media, leveraging other people's media and marketing so that I don't have to do all that myself. That's my top source.
That's awesome. I love that. And I think that I'm going to use this word again, but I'm sure that where you appear, you're choosing that. You're being intentional, right? You're not going on somebody's
Very.
podcast that's all about swaddling babies. And I'm making that up. I
Yeah.
don't even know if there is one. Right. But I'm trying to show the natural opposition of making sure that you are being strategic, because I think one of the things you have to think about is your branding and your image, right?
Yeah.
Who do you want to be? Who do you want to be associated with? And that is where stepping onto somebody else's space is a great way to do that. But you have to be very clear and, again, strategic about how you do that and when you do that. And I think it's a fabulous
100%.
idea. I love that you do that.
Yeah, 100%. So I certainly started off just going on all sorts of podcasts with all sorts of people initially. and realized that I wasn't seeing a lot of return on that. I was having fun and making new connections, but also a lot of the connections I was making weren't very relevant to my progression. So I did start
Mm-hmm.
getting more strategic, and I did start thinking about whose shows is it worth me being on, and
Sure.
started learning more about how to pitch myself to those shows so that I was a more attractive prospect for the host and can really add value to them and their audience. So it meant doing less appearances, but getting more return on my time investment
Mm-hmm.
in those connections and appearances, because I'd done my research, because I'd put in the work, and because I was getting on the right kinds of shows to the right kinds of audiences. That really put me in a position where I could leverage the other people's audiences, or
Mm-hmm.
OTAs as we like to call it,
Yeah.
because that was more powerful and more bang for my buck than paying to do this all myself. Add that, if you can add something like that into your strategy for
Mm.
attracting clients and becoming more known, I think it's at the moment still a very winning strategy.
I think it's winning, and I kind of feel like it's one that we don't hear very often. It's step out of the box a little bit. It's not always the obvious that's going to gain you the most momentum, right? You have to stick your heels in a little bit to gain that traction, right? To grab on. And then how you gain momentum is doing what you said, is to be able to say, okay, where am I going to be strategic and spend my time and figure out what kind of time do I even have? I think for a lot of people coming into the industry, and you briefly touched upon it, they feel like I'll change it up when I get to that point.
Right.
And my attitude is, but dress for success now, not when you get the job.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about it, is set your business up as though you were already doing those things. I'm not saying that you should be lead generating 1 day a week or 1 hour a week, but just make a plan, make a business plan, set up
Yeah.
and say, what am I doing and when am I doing it? When does it make the most sense for me to do that? Not just willy nilly plug it in wherever I can fit it. That is not a great business strategy.
I told you never to call me that. Um,
I can't help myself.
it's absolutely not a great strategy. It is. No, I can think of times where I've been invited onto shows that would have been a lot of fun, but would have really hurt my brand. And one was, I'll tell you, share with you one. They wanted to talk about a time that you broke the law. And it's
Oh,
okay. Well, there's a few times I could pick from,
no
but
way.
then I thought
You know
there's
what?
like,
I don't believe it.
it's true.
Really?
But yes, but I decided not to go on the show because I thought, not that I don't want to be, no, not that I want to be dishonest about like my own past experience or anything like that, but what would that do for my brand? Like if that was a big hit and lots of people listening into that thinking, are they going to want to connect with me if I've been talking about that time I went through a red light and I did get caught and I did pay a fine and I got points on my license. It's like that
Mm.
doesn't really seem like the kind of thing that is going to actually benefit my brand. Probably shouldn't be talking about it now either. But it's
We've
not
all
going to
gone through
help.
a red light,
It's not
John.
going
Come on now. I thought you had something juicy to share.
to.
I'm a little let down right now. I'm just saying.
Not not on this podcast. But
Okay.
let's not go there. But moving swiftly on, yeah, it's really just is it going to hurt your brand to go on this,
Mm.
or is it just going to be one of my favorite analogies that I've used before on the show? Is just going to be pissing in the wind. It's just going to go everywhere and not really serve you. Because throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping something sticks is never a good strategy. Hope is not a strategy. Let's get that clear.
Oh my gosh, right? Hope is not the strategy. You definitely want to take this as it comes. What's my niche? How do I brand myself? Where do I find these people? And then how often am I kind of fishing for them, right? What am I doing? What is the structure of my business? What do I want that to look like? And I think it's a great basic way to think about how you're going to find those people, right?
Yeah.
Beyond the obvious, let me do all the things, because you're not going to do anything, right? You're going to say, I actually have clients and students right now that come into a session hysterically crying. And I'm not exaggerating, because they are so overwhelmed. They put so much pressure on themselves that they're stuck in the mud. They're not gaining any traction, and they're certainly not gaining momentum because they can't even get a grip. So we have to start eliminating some of the things like writing the book, doing the podcast, multiple types of businesses. it's overwhelming to even listen to as a coach. It's okay,
Yeah.
wait a minute. Let's go back to square one. Start at square one, not at square 15 or 25.
Yeah. Yeah. If you have your message and you're clear with that and you're showing up in the right places and you're showing up with good energy and with competence about what you're talking about, then you become an attractive prospect to your clients, I think. And of course, being the kind of coach who is doing a good enough job to get referrals from other people is going to make you a very attractive prospect as well. Because I think that one of the things we perhaps haven't got to, we can spend a whole episode on this, is going to be getting yourself referred by your clients and building up your business, because that can be one of the best ways to scale up your business.
Love that, because guess what? I think that's probably at this point more than 50% of my business. I don't know how that works for you, but it's a nice place to be where people are just referring you, and you're like, wow, it's working. And making sure the messaging is clear. Because, really quick, when you're out there trying to do all the things, what's the message? Is the message even consistent across the channels? So we'll have to talk about that. But referrals, beautiful thing. My favorite thing ever.
Me too. Love me referrals. Why don't you refer someone to our show? We'll be back very soon with another episode of the Coaching Clinic, talking about how to get the right kinds of clients. So we'll see you for that.
Ta-ta for now.